What's up, guys? We have another episode today, and in this episode of Understanding Enneagram from Ground Up, previously we spoke about what Enneagram is, the philosophies behind learning Enneagrams. When we spoke about the gut, no, we spoke about the gut types, right? And then we spoke about the heart types, which is the three and the two. But we didn't cover the four yet, which is also a heart type. So in this episode, we're going to cover four and the head type, which is the 5, 6, and 7. So, Susan, what is the 4 exactly?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so let's pick back up on the heart types for just a second. Type 2, type 3, and 4 are considered the center of intelligence leading from the heart. And what that means is that the heart has particular wisdom, aptitudes, sensitivities, and a particular way of focusing attention for survival. So again, everything comes back to survival, right? In a way that these patterns and predilections and propensities in the brain organize around survival, organize around particular kinds of intelligence. 2s, 3s, and 4s have an intelligence in the heart that leads, that is what they lead with. So the heart is sensitive to belonging, staying included, ensuring I'm approved of, ensuring that I'm liked, ensuring that I'm valued and that I'm accepted. Now you can hear a kind of a thread of intelligence in all of this towards survival. If I stay acceptable and I belong and I'm desired and I'm wanted and I'm valued, I ensure that I stay part of the tribe. Yeah. I ensure that I'm not tossed and eliminated and excluded, which could lead to my own demise, right? Because human beings must be connected to other human beings in order to survive. So the heart knows this. And how does it orient around this basic survival wisdom? Is that there's a high sensitivity to others' impression of me, a self-image that I create that is acceptable, desirable, attractive, has some kind of value in the eyes of others. And 2s and 3s and 4s are all doing this in a little bit of a different way. So when we get to type 4, we call it the romantic, the individualist. Some have called it the tragic romantic. Some have called it the artist. Type 4 registers its value in who am I really? What's authentic me? What makes me special and unique? And within the wisdom of type 4 is a sense of every single one of us is a precious and beautiful assembly unto itself. We are all kind of different and special and unique. And type 4 comes to teach us how to get in contact with my special qualities, my special self, my special offering to the world. Now, what happens in that essential quality of knowing, my holy idea of self, which is the equanimity of me, is that I'm not superior to anything, I'm not inferior to anything, just as I am, is of complete value and worthy of getting to know, worthy of honoring. Type 4 can lose contact with that. And as the ego forms, the self system forms, it tries to remanufacture what makes me special and what makes me unique. So on the very, very high side of type 4, who I am just in my presence, just in my unique self is completely adequate and is its own offering to the world, and others will surely see it. When the type 4 gets in a lower level of developmental well-being, is more traumatized, is more contracted, is more split inside, is more separated from its authentic self, what happens to type 4? It really tries hard to manufacture specialness, uniqueness, creativity, artistry. So this is what it'll look like on the low and gripping and compulsive side of 4. It can be, I only wear purple. Purple makes me special, or I only see works of art from the modern era, or so they start identifying through a process called introjection. They start identifying with things outside of themselves that will make them stand out and be different from others. And that becomes a compulsion. And so when you meet a type 4, let's say, and they're more on the contracted, less self-realized, less evolved into the holy idea and the beauty of what 4 comes to teach all of us. And in a contracted state, they can get over-identified with things outside of themselves to try to create a persona. And it can be all kinds of things. I only listen to a certain kind of music. I only wear my hair a certain way. I only associate with certain kinds of people. I only like one artist. I mean, it can get very fun and playful and colorful as to the way a 4 will express themselves in the world to ensure they've manufactured some form of unique identity that's completely different than others. I was working with a 4 who, when she was young, she wanted to always have the first brand of shoes that came on the market. So she would be the first one to wear Skechers or the first one to wear. And as soon as other kids starting to wear those same shoes, she wouldn't wear them anymore, because she wasn't unique anymore. She wasn't the only one at school that had them. So this is kind of a very oversimplified way of explaining that 4's drive and seeking to be special and unique and different, and to bring that as an offering. 4's tend to be creative. They tend to be identified with their creativity. They tend to be very expressive. They tend to be actually quite connected to their emotionality. 4s oftentimes identify with how they feel as being who they are. I am because I feel me. 2s are I am because I feel you. And 3s are I am because I don't feel me, but I register how you feel, and then I will coordinate myself to adapt to your feelings and your needs and what will be approved of by you. But in the type 4, I am because I feel me. And going into the feelings experience of 4, being that connected to your feelings, I know I got to do my homework right now, but I don't feel like it. I know I need to write a birthday card for someone, but I'm not feeling it. So oftentimes they end up not mobilizing and not showing up in the world until they feel like it, which is a beautiful aspect of being authentic, being authentically with yourself and with your feelings when you do anything. So look at the high side of that. But on the low side, I can get lost in my feelings and my emotionality to where I detach from what's really required of me in reality. I can fall behind. I can end up not doing my homework. I can end up not showing up for others because I didn't feel like it. It can actually really get in my way. Sometimes 4s are referred to as drama queens. I hate the label, but it's because the expression of self through the emotional system is often how 4s are really in the world. So that the emotion wants to come forward, it wants to be expressed, but more importantly, I want to be seen in my emotionality. I want to be felt by others. I want others to share my emotional experience. I want them to share in my pain. I want them to share in my joy. I want them to share in my exaltation. Being seen and being heard and being reflected back when I'm my most authentic self is one of the greatest needs, desires, and hopes for type 4.
Interesting.
That, and as if probably one of the most tragic and painful experiences that will cause trauma to the developing self system of type 4 is to not be seen, to not be heard, to not be taken a special delight in your own unique self. I was working with someone who was a type 4 who was raised in a family of all 5 boys. They were all dressed the same. They were all expected to behave the same. You should be seen and not heard. And they all had the same clothing on. But one of them was a 4. Can you imagine? So this little guy suffered a lot because he was just Hey, I'm here. Hey, wait, do you see me? I know I'm dressed like him, but I'm different. I want you to know how different I am. I want you to know how I feel. I don't feel like this brother. I don't feel like that brother. I'm me. That was not tolerated in this family. So this particular little fellow who wasn't taken a delight in, who wasn't, his parents didn't have any curiosity as to who he really was, who basically expected him to behave a certain way according to what they expected their children to look like, act like, talk like, behave like, caused an incredible rip in his self-development and a complete disorientation, and also defiance against, you want me to be like that? Well, F you. Somebody's in here. But then also on the other side, the trauma and the pain of not being seen, the suffering of never being heard, nobody wanting to even hear my voice, hear my opinion. One of the experiences that this person went through was, okay, good boy, now run along. So when he was compliant, when he was doing what he was supposed to do, it even caused less attention. Good boy, now run along. So there was no differentiation of this child between the child and the expectations of the parents. That the parents just saw this child as a kind of an object that needed to perform a certain way. And there was no differentiation for this little boy between himself as a unique individual compared to 4 other brothers. So that's a little summary of type 4. Type 4s introject from the outside objects and personas and qualities that they think will manufacture this unique persona. And then on the other side, let me talk a little bit more about the suffering of 4. 4s will also introject blaming the self, shaming the self. Something out here happens, the 4 can introject. It was my fault. I did it. I caused it. Something's missing in me. I wasn't the way I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be different. And they can introject this kind of a shame that can cause a deep despair and will cause the 4 to withdraw into the self and kind of collapse on its own. Shame and having introjected something negative from the outside, painted it on themselves, and then kind of going into this frozen heart, despairing mode. It could be something as simple as they're walking to school one morning and someone walks by them and doesn't notice them. God, this person just hates me, or I must have said something awful yesterday, or they introject someone walking by and not noticing them as something that they lack, they didn't do. I'm just invisible. I didn't dress right. They didn't see me. They don't like. So, I mean, you can see how this can get very out of hand, causing a lot of suffering for type 4, thinking that it has to be something different that it is, or it has to show up differently, or it did something wrong, or and that's the negative introjection on self that 4s can really suffer.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's like,
do you relate to that in any way, Prem?
I relate to it in this because of the triangle thing, because there must be
harmonic object relations triad.
I relate to the point where you said, oh, I want to be unique as well, but it's in the style of thinking. That's why for me, it's like, let's say I'm doing this, right? But if someone else is doing this thing, what we are doing, exploring Enneagram in like a self-growth perspective in this particular way, then I wouldn't do it, because why am I doing something that someone else is already doing?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that caused me to like almost be like a defiant, why am I studying something that's why I hated history. Because why am I studying something that everybody already knows? Like, how does it differentiate me in any way, So growing up, I used to fail in 3 subjects, which is my languages and my history and civics, politics. Yeah. Because no matter what perspective you have, it's like my perspective is not unique. And I feel even if I use my intellect and create like a smart perspective, and if other people also have it, why am I thinking? You know what I mean?
That's already been done. Let's move forward right into the unknown, into the new stimulation.
Into the new,
Why go backward?
Yeah. That's what I wanted to ask you about four, which is like, do they want to even have like unique thoughts? You know what I mean?
Oh,
Something
yeah.
that they're uniquely exploring as well.
Yeah. So really, a wonderful teacher who's a four, he once said, when I found out I was a four, I was devastated because there's others like me.
Yeah. Wow.
So the Enneagram showed him that you're not the only one who has this kind of pattern of self-organizing. And yeah, and you know, the truth is, because when you come in with this particular propensity, this particular holy origin in the essential self, you do bring into the world unique,
Yeah.
creative, um, deeply felt, deep meaning. You bring this to the world. It's not just an adaptive strategy for trauma. This is
Yeah.
actually part of the essential uh, holy offering, if I shall say,
Mm-hmm.
of this particular temperamental personality structure to the human collective. So it's no accident that we think Rumi was probably a type four, and
Oh.
my suspicion is Carl Jung might have been a type four, and and some of the great artists were probably type fours, because the need to express what's in here in the outer world is compelling. It's an impulse, it's a drive, it's actually a spiritual purpose. And of course, all of our beautiful drives and impulses and talents and aptitudes that are driven into spiritual purpose can also become a compulsion in the adaptive strategy when when we try to overcome our trauma or the ways that our needs were not met. We're going to use the same gorgeous gifts and aptitudes to compensate for the pain of the trauma suffered. But I love what you said. I want to go back to the harmony triad for just a second, the
Mm-hmm.
1, 4, 7, which is one of the reasons why I asked you, do you relate to type four at
Yeah.
all? Because, you know, the Enneagram, we slice it up in a lot of different triads. It's an incredibly robust mathematical system. But 1, 4, 7 is what's called a harmony triad, object relations, how I relate to self as object, other as object, world as object, and a lot of the way our attachment strategies get formed. But 1, 4, and 7, we call them the utopian idealists suffering frustration triad.
Yeah.
And so type 1 is doing this in the gut, reforming, crusading, what's wrong with the world and how I'm going to make it right. Now I have to make it right. I have to make it a better place and I'm going to improve it. Type 7 is the world is this magnificent playground and it's ideal and it's wonderful and I'm going to try everything. And the 7 kind of uses this utopian idealistic mind to create options and possibilities and go around obstacles and not get stuck and not get limited. So you can see the idealism in the world could be all of this. And then the 4 is doing the same thing, but in the heart, the idealism, utopian emotional experience, the beauty and the and meaning and preciousness and then the frustration of, oh, it's not like that.
Mm.
Oh, it's so disappointing. Oh, didn't happen the way I thought it would. I did, you know, it's like a type 4 is getting ready for a first date, let's say. So they're in the heart and they see all these utopian, beautiful, romantic things are going to happen. And I know I'm going to open the door and they're going to be standing there with a dozen roses and they're going to have this black suit on. I just see it and I see the, anyway, they open the door and the person doesn't have the roses and they're wearing a sweatshirt and tennis shoes when you pictured this, you know, practical tuxedo in your mind. And the 4 is like,
Yeah.
it's like
Shock.
the disappointment because the idealism, utopian, suffering, frustration triad 1, 7, and 4 are all creating this idealistic picture that can quickly organize around an expectation of how it could be. And then it turns to how it should be, and then it turns to what it's not. And so 4s suffer in the heart a lot from being disappointed. Nothing measures up to what I saw in my mind, what I was dreaming about in my heart. And they live actually in kind of this connection to disappointment. And then disappointment causes kind of like a grieving. And grieving is kind of despairing, and it can be very energetically deflating. And Fours can kind of withdraw into what's called this melancholy, this kind of melancholic place where they're in this kind of grieving process and a lot of nostalgia and remembering how it used to be so wonderful and it should have been wonderful. And so they're going through all this kind of a grieving process, right? And this is what's magical about this, though, I will say, and this comes from some new brain science that I feel and find really interesting, is that from a long grieving process, it triggers the reward system in the brain to start longing for something. Now, fours are known to be longing for what's missing. Well, what is going on in the brain to make you long for something? The grieving process, the disappointment process, the wanting something to be different and it's not here. You know, the loss of something that passes away, longing that they're still here. But this longing in the brain triggers the reward system in the brain, starts to trigger dopamine. Dopamine is a lot of the seeking instinct, the purpose instinct. It gets us up to feed ourselves. It gets us up to turn in a resume. It gets us up to contact somebody, puts us in the world, right? It kind of makes us move forward. It's what happens when a four grieves for long enough in this melancholic, nostalgic state of disappointment.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, it's got to be expressed. This is where the four kicks into the way it mobilizes its feeling center into something tangible. Next thing you know, it's journaling this incredible essay or writes a piece of poetry, or it comes out in some form of art, or it goes and does some kind of graffiti, or it ends up marching in an activism. It takes on some kind of activism, or it eventually it gets expressed somehow. They might go cut their hair and change their whole look, but somehow it gets expressed in the world. And this is what four brings to all of us, is that they go so deep into that melancholic state that it comes out and converts into something very artistic, very meaningful, very symbolic, very emotive or provocative, something that ends up touching not only the four, but touching others. That's a great gift of type four. And a lot of other types cannot spend that much time in grieving, disappointment, and melancholy, right? Like type seven, like, whoop, I'm out of here. So for the type that can do that, yeah. You think about when you read the poetry of Rumi, you're like, wow, that's what I feel, but I never could have put words on it. Well, he's put the words on it because he spent the time in here, like hours, like days, like weeks, just being with that suffering and that sorrow and the grieving in such a way that it produces something beautiful. And that's what we have to thank the type four for, is that they can spend the time in a way that others are jumping out of, denying, running away from, avoiding, and don't ever get that depth of sensitivity that fours are helping all of us access. That makes sense.
Interesting. It sounds like that identity itself is revolving around how they feel about different things and different aspects of reality.
Yes. I was interviewing a type four to help him discover his Enneagram, dominant Enneagram pattern. And I said, so tell me about feelings. Tell me about that in your life. He goes, feelings? He goes, what a dumb question. Feelings are everything to me.
Wow.
And and so from that perspective, he's assuming, of course he's assuming, that we all have that same like feelings, like that is my whole world. I don't even know who I am without my feelings. And as a type one, my feelings are suppressed. They're like distant sensations that I've got to censor, and I've got to organize them right away. I've got to get a hold of them right away, contain them, and then
show them their place. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've got to behave my emotions in an appropriate way. I've got to be the mature, measured example at all times, which means I'm disconnected from my feelings. And, even understanding what feelings are is something that took me a long time. And I got to credit Ginger Lapid Bogda's beautiful handout. She's got a whole handout, like an 8.5 by 11, describing all the different feelings that are interpreted from our different emotions. And I'm like, wow, this is so great. I don't accept that one, So, but for a type four, feelings are everything. I am because I feel, me. Now, we talk about level of developmental well-being again. As a type 4 becomes more self-realized, more mindfulness work, more present awareness, more understanding of the self and its reactions to life, as it evolves beyond its mechanistic drive only from the heart center, brings the gut center online, brings the head center online. We end up in the what's called the fourth way in Gurdjieff's work, right? That's balanced man. Then it changes a little bit from I am because I feel me to I am because I feel you too. It's not just my feelings anymore. It's actually your feelings, and mine are both equal. Mine are not superior. Mine are not inferior. They both matter. And I'm here with you. I can empathize with you, not only empathize with me. I can see your feelings, feel your feelings without being overcome by my own, or without my own having to take over the conversation, or my own being superior. Oftentimes you'll hear fours, I feel more than anybody. They can take on a superiority position because they claim that they feel more than others, that they're more compassionate than others, that they're more something than others. And that's before the 4 gets out of the I am because I feel me. I am because I feel everything. And you too. And I care about what you feel equal to what I care about what I feel. So that's the development path of 4.
Yeah, sounds like they can take a feeling and just stay there for a long time till and can like express it.
Yeah.
Because for me, emotions are very feminine. They're like fleeting almost.
Yeah, beautiful word. They're fleeting. For a 4, they're big. They mean something. The moment I'm taken over by a feeling, everything stops. That is who I am. And I am angry. I am sad. Listen to that. I am that feeling.
Yeah.
And then I mobilize around that. My thoughts orient around that. It's completely all encompassing. I become the feeling. I live it out. It takes precedence over what I had to do, my to-do list. It takes precedence over all of that. It becomes the priority. And for 4s, it's like, how can you not? How is that not happening for you? It's hard for them to understand that others are not dominated by this internal expression of self being completely connected to my feelings, my interpretations of the world from the feeling center. So I see something over there and I'm going to feel something about it. It's not like I see something over there and I analyze it. It's like I feel everything. Then that forms the identity. That forms the identity of type 4.
Sounds like they would be really good at making films then.
Say that again?
Sounds like they would be really good at making films or something like that. Like films.
You often see 4s as absolutely creative producers, writers,
Yeah.
multimedia artists, absolutely. Theater, musicians, painters,
The more artsy people.
creative writers, activists. And you see these particular aptitudes and talents in the world in a way that nurtures all of us, in a way that gets all of us closer to our own hearts and to what matters to us. 4s are here to teach us to find meaning in our life, to not be a robot, to not just follow the crowd, to like, okay, what do you really want to do with your life? What has meaning for you? These are questions from type 4. What did you come here to offer? What did you come here to express? This is like in the chakra system, this is second chakra on fire. What am I going to birth into the world? How am I going to bring my unique and authentic self to the voice of the collective? What do I have to create more meaning for others, for myself? And you imagine, so now you take type 4 out of the 9 Enneagram temperamental proclivities, you take them out. What a loss to all of humanity.
Yeah.
Right. If you take any one of these type structures out, what a loss to humanity. Each one of us contributing a particular pattern of adaptive strategies and a pattern of a focus of attention that's bringing a gift, that's bringing a necessary survival gift to the evolution of the species. That's bringing a gift for each other's development and realization, self-realization. Each one of us is contributing to each other, providing resources to the human collective that each one of us can learn to use and grow from one another by being receptive to these 9 particular patterned points of view, aptitudes, gifts, and talents.
Yeah. It's definitely very interesting what you're saying, because I feel like we are living in a society where even if you feel something, you oftentimes forget because, always there's like an emergency problem that comes up, work, house, dishes, or something like that. But having something that is like staying constant and like emotion that is like there, like let's say like a song or something, and you can like come back to the song to like tune into or tune into that feeling, I think is a great gift. So that,
Oh, absolutely. Well, I love your perspective from type 7. As soon as you start to have a feeling, an urgency pops up. This is the world of 7. It's like the anxiety and the urgency rises, and that's part of what moves 7 around so quickly. And if you look at David Daniels having matched the Enneagram types to the 9 temperamental proclivities of temperament in the work of Thomas and Chess, type 7 is a high sensitivity to stimulation. Well, what does that really mean? So because there's something arising in the 7 that makes it move fast. Like, oh, there's those apples are red. And oh my God, there's green apples over there. Oh my God, those are even pinker. And the 7s goes, and this kind of adrenaline is creating an emergency a little bit in 7. It's creating
very nice.
Move. That's in the wiring of the central nervous system that is imbued in the dynamic structure of 7 that you came in with. It's a gift. It's a gift, right? How does that serve humanity when you have one little human that is set down in a field and he sees all the apples really fast, and you have a different one, maybe like a little type 5 who lands on this green apple and he's like, wow, look at that green apple. He's down there
Newton must be a 5 then.
He's learning everything about the green apple, and he's that green, and he's seeing in all the complexity of it. And the 7's already found 5 different kinds of apples. So, the wiring. I love honoring the wiring, the beautiful inherent wiring we come in with that has a particular proclivity in it that organizes the developmental pathways in a certain way that is survival contributory. One's not better than the other, but they are different, and honoring that different. The belief that la tabula rasa, born a blank slate, which it was like, I think in the 1600s, and I can't remember the scientific philosopher that claims that give me your child and I'll turn him into anything you want them to be by the time they're 8. And they go, wow, my God, there's someone in there. There's someone in there that's not quite conforming to this plan. And we know that la tabula rasa is not what happens. At the moment you're in utero, you're getting organized. And what all goes into organizing you, I find utterly fascinating. What mom eats, of course, the DNA blueprint you've gotten from all your parents and your ancestors. Yeah, that's a big part of it. Mom's emotions, mom's stress levels, how much cortisol is mom running, how much nutrition is she eating, how much adrenaline is she running, how nurtured is she being, how cared for is she excited about having this child, or she's got to give this child up the moment it's born. Like, all this is going into the way the organism is getting structured. And then we've got this other piece that is utterly mysterious and mystical, is the light, the body of life that comes in and animates the developing creature. We We call it the soul, we call it the spirit, we call it the holy idea, we call it some kind of cosmic spark, right? If we take and I just learned this from Russ Hudson this morning, in the Kabbalah, they call it the spark, the divine spark of life. It's unique, has its own essential qualities. Is that also informing the development of the structure that the moment I'm born is ready to support me to respond to the environment in which I've landed? Some of us land in a beautiful, loving, secure, nurturing environment, and some of us land in a hostile, scary, unpredictable, abandoning environment. But by the time I'm born, I've got something structured to respond to the environment in which I've landed. And there's some particular propensities that my central nervous system has that's going to help me cope and form solutions to the threat or the nurturance in which I'm receiving the moment I land in the third dimension reality of being born into this world, coming out of my nice, safe, comfy place. Some children are they're not that safe in utero, which I've learned also, there's a lot of threat that happens in utero that the children are aware of, including women that are getting physically abused during pregnancy, which I heard lots of stories about this in prison. That is threatening the fetus. So not every fetus is having a safe and comfy in utero experience. And of course, that'll affect that child. But the moment we take our first breath, that central nervous system is ready to go. It's ready to respond. And any woman that has had a child, or especially has had more than one child, knows that those little space creatures are different from one another from the moment you meet them. Some want to be on your body constantly. Others kind of tend to be more fascinated with some visuals around them. They're different. Some cry more when they're put down. Some tend to have more resources to kind of explore the world a little more freely and safely earlier than others. And there's so many differences that are available for us to witness immediately in every human child that comes in. So I went off on a tangent, but I think
pretty interesting.
That the blank slate is really not what's happening in my non-researcher. I'm not a psychologist. But I just in my coaching experience and my own deep work and my own reading, it's not quite a blank slate like they used to think so.
Yeah. So let's go to the head types, which is
Okay.
the 5, 6, and 7. And lastly, we'll get to my type, which is the 7.
Yeah.
So let's start with the 5, because I heard 5s are the ones who take a craft and spend like 50 years, like the Japanese culture, That's what I've heard about it. I don't know.
So 5, 6, and 7. So again, we're in 3 centers of intelligence, right? We're in the gut center of intelligence, the heart center of intelligence, what we talked about already. And then we have the head center, the mental center of intelligence. These 3 centers of intelligence they're really processing factories in a way. So these 3 centers of intelligence are receiving data and impressions from the outside, and they're organizing and processing and receiving data and energy from the inside, and they're assimilating. So the mental center of intelligence, which governs types 5, 6, and 7 on the Enneagram, are working with the mammalian aversive emotional system of fear. And it looks like anxiety when it's low level, anxiety and angst, as Russ Hudson would say, angst, fear, just full blown, flat out fear. And then it can move to terror. So we've got anxiety, fear, terror. 5, 6, and 7 are responding to this aversive, meaning it doesn't feel good in the body. It's full of cortisol and adrenaline and norepinephrine and different balances of that, to get our attention, to get us mobilized, to get us to do something to survive. So the 3 big aversive emotional systems are big survival systems shared by all mammals. This is the work of Jaak Panksepp and also Jack Killen, who originally brought this to the Enneagram community way back in 2008, that these aversive emotional systems tie directly to the Enneagram. The anger rage system ties to the gut center of intelligence. The panic, distress, grieving, sadness system responds to the heart center of intelligence, and the head center is responding to the anxiety, fear, terror, aversive emotional system to ensure we survive. So what does that look like on 5, 6s, and 7s? So I'll just say generically, 5s tend to detach from the fear. 6s live in and express the fear constantly, and 7s are in denial of the fear. So that's the 3 types, although all 3 are oriented in the mental center as their dominant, gifted aptitude, place where they have kind of a neural proclivity to adapt and organize solutions to stress. Each one of those works with the fear a little differently. So type 5, let's start with type 5. Type 5 is called the investigator, sometimes called the hermit, sometimes called the observer, the thinker, another word. Type 5s are detached from the fear. They go up into the mind, and as long as I can figure it out, as long as I can form solutions and I can understand things and I've got insight and I've worked it out and I've seen all the possibilities and how they relate, as long as I can do that, I will survive and I will not be annihilated. 5s have a sense of knowledge is power. And how do I maintain my survival and my existence? And how do I prevent my own annihilation? Is that I've got something to offer in the form of insight, information, knowledge, learning. I contribute with what's up here, and I offer that to the world. 5s tend to have just a compulsion mixed with an aptitude for learning. So you can imagine if the way that I survive is through gaining knowledge and information, I'm going to spend a lot of my time studying and learning and being curious and wondering and organizing myself around facts and thoughts and figuring things out. And not only do I figure something out that might be an engineering oriented or mechanically oriented, a lot of 5s are going to be figuring out more of the esoteric, invisible things, the cosmos and the planets and the Big Bang Theory and how do we humans get here and like their mind's just going out into things that are really hard for a lot of us to think about for very long because it gets overwhelming. 5s don't get overwhelmed when they think about all these things that are hard to think about. It actually gets them excited. It gets them really high, like creating a hypothesis and then researching it for many, many, many years, or getting an intuition about how something really works, and then putting themselves to task to study that particular idea or thought they had for a long period of time. They don't get bored. They get excited. They get infused with life force and reward in the system. They get dopamine from following their thoughtful ideas and pursuits and insights and wonderings and postulations. What else can I say about type 5? So type 5 detaches from the fear and builds a big mind to not feel existentially in danger. And I just want to add that one thing that the 3 head types bring to humanity is they're really in touch with our existential danger. Like we're down here on a ball that's spinning in space. We don't really know where we are. Every single day is a threat. Every single day something can go wrong. Human life is full of suffering and challenge and unpredictability and uncertainty. And the head types kind of know this. They get how little we are compared to how much we don't know. And so these 3 different types are kind of working with that existential fear all the time. But the 5 detaches from that fear and can also kind of detach from the demands and expectations of others and kind of contains its energy and contains its needs, doesn't want to need too much from others, doesn't want to depend on others, doesn't want to get exhausted by others, can easily get drained by the emotional needs of others, and can get drained on others making claims to its time and resources, its life forces and its time. So anyone who's involved in a relationship with the type 5 is going to find the type 5 needs a lot of alone time. They want to go up into their minds and tinker. Type 5s like to get away from people and situations so they can sort of relive the experience and then feel their own emotions about it. They need to be away. They need to be isolated. They need that alone time to figure out how they feel about things, what their thoughts are on something. They don't like to be cornered. They don't like to be intruded upon. They need time to recharge their very sensitive central nervous systems. And so let me talk about sensitivity for a second. Because people think, well, fives can be like computers, like they don't have any feelings. Well, that's actually couldn't be further from the truth. Fives are intensely sensitive to their own feelings, like tender, fragile almost. Central nervous system is very sensitive to sound, to light, to noise, to chaos, to distractions, to stimulation that's too much. It's about as opposite to the 7 as you can get, because the 7 can thrive in a bunch of multiple stimulating things coming at it. But the 5 is like, oh, I got to get out of here. Too many people talking at the same time and nobody's saying anything that's really coherent. It's like, oh, no. So 5s need to pull away, kind of recharge their battery, protect the sensitivity of their hearts. Very tender, beautiful, sensitive people. But they don't share that often. And they can detach from their feelings and go up into their mind to solve feelings they don't want, to how do I really feel about this? What am I going to do about it? So I do use their head as kind of an armoring against deep feelings, negative feelings they don't want to cope with, or things that are too hard. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. You said they spend a lot of time existentially. Yeah, so you're saying all head types do that? Because I feel even I do that. That's why.
Well, the head types, so up in the head types, you've got fear as the mammalian aversive emotional system that kind of drives these type structures. What fear lets us do is it lets us jump into the future and anticipate. So seeing what could go wrong, seeing what could happen, seeing what we don't understand yet, seeing what hazards are out there, seeing the unknowns. So 5, 6s, and 7s have this kind of future tripping capacity. Now, what that does is we're the only animal that we know of that can scare ourselves to death just with our own mind, right? So we can start projecting all kinds of existential dangers. And 5s, 6s, and 7s are dealing with this in a different way. But the real calamity of the human condition is that the existential threat to survival is always here. Like I said, in essence, we sort of don't really know where we are. We really don't know how we got here. We don't, none of us knows when our last day is going to be. Like, there's so many unknowns. There's so much unpredictableness about being here as a human. But, we put our head down and we make our life and we do what we're supposed to do. But when you stop and you look up and you go, I don't know where I am. I don't know what I'm doing. Is it safe? Is it not safe? There's questions we have no answers to. 5, 6s, and 7s, they kind of live in this existential truth. Like, whoa. And 5s spend a lot of time, trying to come up with the answers to our existence. The Big Bang Theory is, probably came from a type 5. What was his name? The Theory of Everything fellow. What is his name? That incredible, and he had Lou Gehrig's disease for 70 years.
Yeah.
Stephen Hawking.
Guy, Stephen Hawking, yeah.
He's probably
A Brief History of Time, yeah.
He's like, I'm going to figure out the unknown, Einstein, another one, thinking, I'm going to come up with the answers to why we're here and who, these guys are amazing, right? And they're doing the hard thinking. This is a 5, I'm going to find the answers. The 6 is like spinning in, I don't know, and I'll get to 6 in a second. And the 7's like, I'm going to go have fun while I'm here because this is stressful. I'm out of here. You guys do all the worrying, but I'm going to go someplace better because it's calm over there, it looks safe over there, looks fun over there, and I'm out of here because Sevens also have this existential awareness that if I stop moving, I'm going to get caught in the fact that I'm on a ball spinning in black space and nobody knows where we are, and I'm going to get stuck and I can get trapped. And I had a couple of sevens say to me, and I'm going to get buried in a hole alive and no one's going to hear me and there's going to be no help. I'll be trapped for the rest of my life. So yeah, that existential terror that is a real part of our human condition. I think the head types, they're sensitive to it, and they manage that existential fear 3 different ways.
Okay, yeah. So that's 5. What's 6?
So 6, type 6 in the center of the head types. So type 6 comes to teach us how to prevent danger, hazards, the uncertainties of the world, how to create security. They're looking for assurance, reassurance. They're looking for certainty. They live in a state of kind of a chronic angst. They're called the loyal skeptic, the troubleshooter, and the great guardian. So type 6 is here actually using their mind in a way that is constantly doubting and constantly searching, constantly unsure, pursuing assuredness. And type 6 comes to teach us how to rely on each other, even though for type 6, depending on anybody is absolute terror, because they're certain that you can't trust anybody, you can't trust anything, but yet they are continuing to pursue what I can trust, what I can find certainty in, what can make me safe, what can ensure something bad won't happen. So this future tripping capacity I mentioned earlier, this anticipation talent of 6 shoots out into the future, sees what can go wrong, what are the scenarios. I see scenarios. This could happen. What if? That could happen. What if? What if? What if? And then it informs them back in the now to how to prepare to prevent anything bad from happening, how to prevent danger, how to prevent the idea from not working, how to prevent my car from breaking down, how to make sure I'm safe, how to make sure you're safe. Sixes have a tendency of seeing things ahead and wanting to warn others. So they're kind of the warning junkies. And then they're also the I told you so junkies, because they see things happening. They see what can go wrong, and they are terrified of what can go wrong. And their life force is used in kind of a form of chronic prevention. So they worry a lot and they ruminate. Kind of the worry that doesn't get satisfied is sort of, it can with some other kind of types turn into kind of an OCD response where it keeps looping. Did I lock the door? I didn't lock the door. Did I lock the door? I don't know. Like they get reassurance, and then the reassurance kind of falls out from under them, and then they're like, and then they question it again. And then they get the certainty, like they'll come back and say, hey, did I hear you say XYZ? You'll go, yeah, I said XYZ. They'll go, okay, great. Yeah, great. They come back here, and then 3 hours later, like, did I hear that correctly? And they come back and they have to. So it's this need to continually get reassurance. They actually, even though they're in the center of the head triad, in the mental faculties being sort of their dominant adaptive strategy for survival, they kind of lose contact with trusting their own mind. And they actually kind of displace their mind outside of themselves. And so that's why they're always seeking for an authority to trust, or a company that they can work for and feel safe with, a religion that okay, this is the answer. Okay, this is the answer. And then like, then they get disappointed, like, oh, no, that's not the answer. And then they go and find another authority to put their faith in and their courage in, their belief in. Okay, that feels great. That feels great. Oh no. They see something they don't trust, and then they backpedal out of that. So it's like, I trust, I don't trust. Foot on the gas, foot on the brake. I believe you, I don't believe you. So it's this kind of ambivalent inability to land solidly anywhere. The lower level of developmental well-being is a 6, the more hyper vigilant, the more paranoid, the more inability to trust anything and anybody, as well as myself, pervades and dominates structure. The more developmental well-being a 6 comes into, self-realizes, is working with this, the more they come to actually trust their own inner guidance, believe in their own mind, and they don't displace their power and authority outside of themselves, which actually frustrates the daylights out of them because they displace their authority out here. They trust something out here, it fails, and then they come back to going, I knew what I should have done. And then they get mad at themselves. Does this make sense? So it's this constant kind of a dance. And, they say 6s, and I learned this from Russ and Jessica years ago, 6s are the great guardians and the great protectors of mankind and of society. And 6s may rise to actually help guide humanity in this very fascinating time in our evolution where we've got incredible dangers right in front of us that, if misused, can be the end of it. And then we have all this incredible spirituality and the development of our own inner spirit, our own inner light. We have it happening at the same time. And may 6s help us, help to guide us into what's best for our species at this time. They are the great guardians, especially when they get grounded in themselves and locate their inner compass.
So in my head, it sounds like almost something is triggering fear within you, and you're like just responding to it.
Yeah.
To the stimulus, right?
Yeah. Yeah. They almost no, 6s they're in a chronic state of angst.
Yeah.
And a chronic state of anxiety that produces a mental chatter that won't stop. And it's the what if chatter and the preparedness chatter. And I need to cover that base, and I need to think about that, and I need to cover that, and I need to do that. And it's like that. It's actually, when I think about the type 6 structure in full throttle, I'm exhausted because it's so intense. The vigilance, the hypervigilance, the scanning the environment for hazards, dangers, and what can go wrong, scanning for distrust. He said this yesterday, he said this today. Don't trust that. This measuring constantly and the checking back. And 6s can be very provocative, and they can test for trust, and they'll test you. You said this yesterday. What are you going to say today? Can I trust you? Can I trust you? They do a lot of that. Their defense mechanism is projection, where this incredibly powerful imagination that 6s have access to actually, instead of it just receiving impressions and intuitions from the external environment, it actually starts to project their fears outward on the environment, and they can start seeing untrustworthy things and can project their own fears onto other people, onto their relationships, onto the world. And it becomes very real to a type 6. So the imagination has already lived it as if it's real, and then it gets projected out onto somebody else. I knew you never liked me. I knew I could never trust you. It's like, and 6s can become very combative in their level of distrust and trying to provoke certainty and trustworthiness out of others, can be very accusatory of others, can be very testing, and it can leave others feeling on edge, on edge in the presence of a 6 who's not aware that their need for certainty is causing others to be very destabilized. That makes sense.
So in my head, okay, it sounds like a response to fear, and in my head, the opposite of fear is courageousness, right? It's not. So the way I think about courage, right, it's not like there's like this huge monster in front of me and I'm like shaking and standing in front of it. Of course, I see that's like the movie form of courage, right? But in my head, there's like a quality of courage which is like, oh, there's a monster in front of me. I'm scared, but I'm also excited by the challenge, because it feels like I can defeat the monster also. you know?
So the
So,
opposite of fear is not courage. The opposite of
sure.
fear is homeostasis, right? So if we just go to the central nervous system for a second, when fear is relaxed, the system is in a state of homeostasis, calm, abiding, as David would say, that the system is regulated, that the aversive emotion is not flooding through your system. So that's the opposite of fear. However, when we have fear, how we transcend the fear as we move into courage. So the fear
Yeah.
is present, right? And then we enact the courage circuits in order to
Yeah. Okay.
stay present and take right action in the face of fear. And taking right action in the face of fear, now this can get very interesting. We have different ways of responding to fear based on some really primal reflexes or instincts: fight, flight, or freeze. And our body will decide this for us, because if we get in a high state of danger, our central nervous system takes over, the amygdala takes over: fight, flight, or freeze. And one of those, the system is calculating in that moment which one I am best at, have the most resources to act out, or is the best for the situation. So I might freeze and play dead. I might
Yeah.
decide I've got to fight that monster, or I got to run. So that's not happening so much in the neocortex as it is in our instinctual reflexive body. And I find it really interesting which Enneagram types lean to fight first, tend to freeze first, and tend to flight first. Of course, it's really easy. 8s are going to fight first. 8s,
Yeah.
the tendency is to fight the threat.
Yeah.
The 7s, the tendency is to flee,
Yeah.
is to go avoidant and run. And the freeze response, if you look at type 9, type 5, maybe type 4, they might have a tendency to freeze first. I'm a type 1. I tend to freeze fight. So I really love looking at the really huge threat response on the body of the 9 different types. And we definitely have different resources that we will lean into if it's life or death in that moment. And this is where it's not necessarily neocortex. There's a tiger right there. Should I fight this tiger? It's not like that. It's,
Yeah.
right, it's in the body. And this is why we call the Enneagram type structure, because the structure is organizing the adaptive strategies, the structure of the central nervous system, of the 3 parts of brain is organizing the threat response, the adaptive strategy to saving myself from imminent physical danger, or also protecting myself, my self system, my self image, my ego from destruction. Same.
Mm. So you're saying it's almost like if fear was a darkness, then the light that like let's say if you're entering a dark room, right? So the darkness you can like associate with fear, and to then see the room, you would need the light, which would be the courageousness.
Mm-hmm.
Would
Yeah.
that be a good
Courage
analogy?
is an energetic transcendence, so that you're
Transcendence
still
and stuff.
able to act. You're still able to act in the presence of fear. You're mobilizing. And, courage has kind of a qualitative consciousness to it when we decide to move into courage, instead of being paralyzed by fear, instead of the fight, flight, freeze system taking over. There's actually a transcendence into courage and into a state of conscious right action. And it takes a lot of presence to do that. It takes a
Yeah.
lot of presence, especially if we're absolutely terrified. We can get terrified of addressing conflict. We can
Yeah.
get terrified of standing up in front of a courtroom and having to defend ourselves to a judge. I mean, this can elicit terror, right? Because the terror of the wrong outcome that could affect us, right? But the ability to stay present, calm enough to stay cognitive and emotionally regulated to enact the best possible decision or solution in the moment, to bring, courage is a kind of a regulated state of being. There's something in this that's regulating the fear to the point where we can function toward the best possible solution for the moment. What is courage? It's some kind of an energy. It's a regulated energy.
Would you say?
Go ahead.
Would you say it's like a conscious transcendence, or could it be like an unconscious transcendence as well? Could a reaction to something be courage, or is it that fear arises and then someone consciously then transforms the fear into courage? You understand my question?
Yeah, and it's a beautiful question. And so I'm going to answer it in a couple of ways. If I go into my fight, flight, flee, fight, flight, freeze reflexes, it's not conscious.
Yeah.
Let's say I decide to run in the face of some kind of danger. And then after someone goes to me, wow, you were so courageous. I'll go,
just ran.
I ran. It wasn't an act of courage. Or, the 8 just starts pummeling someone. Right? And someone goes after, wow, you were so courageous. And 8 will go, I don't know if that was courage. It just happened to me. So my interpretation of courage has more conscious application, that you're able to regulate your fear enough to choose the courageous solution for the moment. And that, courage is where there is imminent risk involved, and yet you still move toward right action. So I think there's a little more transcendence of the reflexes, the automatic reflexes. My automatic reflex, my instinctual fight, flight, or freeze, it might look courage to other people, but I was
won't feel courageous.
Yeah, I mean, I might look back on it and go, oh, wow, that looked really courageous, but I was just in a reflex. David Daniels always shared this story of being out on a boat with his wife and another couple, and ended up in a massive storm. And the captain of the boat went into freeze, and he couldn't drive the boat. He would just lost himself. David, who's a 6, he says, David, you got to drive. And so, so the captain leaves the thing that drives the boat. I forget.
Yeah, the wheel, right? Yeah.
This guy takes off down below. David puts his hands on the steering wheel. And so David is like, but he said, I was in a state of total mind quiet and calm. And he says, I was terrified, but I had to do it. So to stand there with his hands on that, and this was a very violent storm, the water splashing, and David drove that boat back into the harbor. And so that is that he had to transcend his own terror. In that moment, they were all going to die. The captain of the sailboat completely obliterates his job, leaves it, and there's David. And that was courage, because he didn't even know how to drive a boat. He's not a captain. Right? So he just used his own right action to overcome his terror and do what was right for all involved. That's courage. That is the transcendence of fear, not the opposite of fear, but the transcendence of fear. And courage has this magical ability, I'll call it, to regulate the reflexive system. David probably wanted to jump over the side and swim away.
Classic 6, huh?
Stay there. And it was a couple hours that he had to take that boat in, terrified. So that's courage.
Yeah, it's also interesting. I find it really beautiful that you cannot feel courage without fear, I think you need fear in order to then feel courageousness.
Yes, absolutely. And
You
there is
can't directly just feel
there's a
courage.
risk involved and the outcome is unknown. So you're acting without certainty. So there's
Yeah.
a risk involved. Yeah. And that
So
requires.
so if a 6 or a 5 tunes into this frequency of courage, then what would their actions look like compared to, let's say, just taken away by fear?
So that was a story about 6. What does a type 5 look like? Courageously. My gosh, we'd have to
Right action.
well, right action
Or
is,
6.
and it's a solution that has no defined outcome, where there's a risk of something you believe you can't tolerate. So let's talk about public speaking for a second. So, a lot of people have an absolute terror of public speaking. Well, why is that? There's a fear
Yeah.
of being judged. There's a fear of making a mistake. There's a fear of not knowing enough. There's a fear of being ridiculed. There's a fear of overexposure. So, these are all kind of scary human fears, right? So for a type 5, and I'm working with a type 5 right now who is terrified to share some of his esoteric ideas with the world. Terrified. So for this 5 to transcend the terror of being ridiculed, being found out to be flaky, not enough, doesn't know enough, risks his license, to actually still get up at a conference and share his esoteric ideas, he's going to have to transcend what he finds fearful and horrifying about the potential negative outcomes of the exposure. So for 5s to transcend the horror of being exposed and judged and annihilated, that takes courage. They have got to enact the courage system. Let's call it the courage circuits that will help regulate the fear and not send them into paralysis. 5s go into paralysis. They just pull back and they're gone. They're in their own world. They're in their private world. They're in their library. They're thinking, and they go up into the head and they don't mobilize. They don't bring themselves to the third dimensional practical world of
Yeah.
actually showing up and risking exposure, risking someone saying, you don't know enough. You didn't think that through. You don't know your stuff. That's terrifying for a 5. It's terrifying for a 5. And them having no resources to defend themselves in front of others would be terrible. This is why 5s can spend 10 years studying one thing before they speak on it.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I had a huge fear of public speaking as well, which I
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but
a
now
lot
I
of,
don't do that much.
and it's also a terror in the heart. If I am not accepted by others after I speak and I'm annihilated and I'm thrown from the 5, I will die, right? It's
Yeah.
terrifying, right?
What? So how does like a 7 deal with public? Because I have a story about public speaking, what happened to me and how I feel it, but I want to hear your perspective first of what 7 public speaking should feel like.
So let's see if it matches up. This is a good
Yeah.
experiment. So type 7 is the third mental type, head type, faculties of the mind, as the armoring or defensive strategies against threat and stretch and survival. So the 7s are called the epicure, the adventurer. What's the other name for 7?
Curious. I don't know.
Yeah, there's one other name for it, and I can't think of it, but the adventurer and the epicure. But the 7s come to teach us about possibility and options. So 7s are full of anticipatory talent. They can shoot into the future. And what's amazing about 7s is that they can imagine things that are not yet here in the world. 7s are highly connected to the system of desire. So imagine the system of desire is directly connected to the system of intervention, not intervention, sorry, the system of invention. 7 highly connected to the system of desire, and that tends to promote and engender invention, what's not here yet. So 7s like to bring things in from this idealistic utopian mind that can see what's possible and see what could be and how we could make it more better and more exciting and more fun. And Steve Jobs, I want 1,000 songs in my pocket.
Yeah.
carry a huge boombox around on my shoulder. I want it this big, and I want to put all of my different music, because I like lots of different artists. And what I've heard through watching his documentaries is, and you guys need to create this in 3 months. And they're like, what? He's like, this doesn't even exist yet. We can't make it that small. We can't. Well, they did create it in the first little, what do you call it? The little iPods.
iPad, yeah.
A little iPod came out. That's a 7. He connected to desire. I don't want to walk around with this big, heavy stereo on my shoulder.
Yeah, the tape recorder, right? That was the Sony Walkman came out that time.
Walkmans, but he wanted it even smaller, and he wanted to, the Sony Walkman, you had to have one, tape, or you had to sit for hours and make your own tapes, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how many of us have done that from the 80s? And then you got the Walkman CD player. You could play one CD at a time. Well, no, he wanted Steely Dan, and he wanted, Metallica, and he wanted Stevie Nicks. He wanted them all on the same little tiny disc. So this is bringing what doesn't exist yet into the dimensional world of reality, using the imagination, the creative what's possible mind, which is the gift of 7. 7 tends to see on the bright side. They're positive outlook types. They reframe and reorganize reality into something more pleasurable, something more possible, something more limitless. 7s are the dreamers, but they dream in such a way that they can actually create for mankind what will make all of our lives better and more sweet and more joyful and more fun and more exciting, and see how this relates to that and that relates to that. And there's great thinkers on this planet that are located in type 7, who are oriented and structured in type 7. Now on the defensive side, 7s absolutely disdain being trapped, limited, stuck in suffering, stuck in conversations that go nowhere, sitting in a bunch of emotional strife where there's no solution, going over the same things over and over again, spending too much time in the past. Let's be with today. Let's look to tomorrow. So they're kind of this forward moving, anticipatory type that would rather talk about possibilities than discrepancies, than disgruntlement. It's like, oh, do we have to go over that again? Like, why talk about what's not working? Let's talk about what's working. So this positivity kind of overtakes the system. Now, and the defense mechanism of 7 is rationalization. So using this incredibly creative, positive outlook, positive reframing mind that detaches from its own fear, that kind of represses it, is to rationalize. So anything that goes wrong in the life of a 7, there's a way of spinning it into something positive. Ways that go wrong in relationships with 7s, they have a way of spinning it into something positive. I'll give you a true example of a story that I heard when I was working in prison. Is this guy off? He was so stressed out, and he was just so bored, and he was living with this lady, and he just, the mundane, the everyday grind, the no new stimulation. This is like a death to type 7. Anyway, he was bored to tears. He was frustrated. He was a 7, a lower developmental well-being 7, right? So the limits are like choking him, coming home every day, same partner, same TV shows. He was like, ugh. So anyway, he takes off for a month. Just decides he's going to take off. He wants to go travel, and he leaves his partner. And, I guess he left a little note, hey, I'll see you in a while. I had to get out of here. I just had to get out of here, So he's gone for like a month. She's in panic. She can't reach him. She doesn't know where he is. I mean, he went somewhere pretty far. I can't remember if it was he went to Canada or something. He comes back after a month, and she's like ready to strangle him because she's had to take care of all the bills and didn't know where he was. And she was just left with everything, right? And he looks at her and he goes, look how well you did. You're amazing. So he kind of rationalizes it. So he spins her strife into how she should be proud of herself and that she was so capable. And so she's kind of, dumbfounded, because she's like, is that a compliment? I think that's a compliment. I think he's just minimized what happened to me, So that's the rationalization of 7. So they take really a situation where he was highly irresponsible in a way that, she could barely hold him accountable for how she was left in the lurch. He tries to spin it into a real gift for her to learn how strong she was. So that's rationalization. So sevens have a way of spinning the dark and difficult parts of life into something positive. And again, imagine what a gift this is to all of us. You teach us how to look for a possibility, look for another way to do it. Don't get stuck on a particular outcome. What's a new outcome? Because they're constantly bringing in more. It's kind of a gluttony of the mind. It's also a gluttony for life. It's a gluttony for ideas. It's a gluttony for new exciting things. It can be a gluttony for dating lots of different people. It's like, I want to experience everything. And, sevens come to teach us that in each different situation, we get to be a different experience of ourselves. So sevens know this, right? So if I have five, if I date one person of each Enneagram type, let's say I date every Enneagram type, I'll get to see who I am with all these different people. See, this is the wisdom. If I go to Nepal, I'll experience myself in that culture. And then if I go to England, then I'll get to experience me in that culture. And they kind of are a gluttony for experiences and the impact putting themselves in so many different situations will have on them. So really, it's an experiential life. And the more experiences, the better, which is the gluttony of type 7. So now let's go to how you experience fear. How would a 7 deal with public speaking? And I'll tell you, a lot of 7s are really good at getting up in front of people. There's a charmingness, there's a lightheartedness, there's kind of an effervescence in 7s, there's a playfulness. 7s are not as sensitive to others approving of them and are not as oriented to change themselves in order to please others. They're more of a little bit of an entertainer or a charmer when getting in front of other people. And they can kind of go into this lighthearted persona because 7s regulate their emotions by keeping the outside world up and positive, so they stay up and positive. So what I mean by that is, by 7s making other people happy and make them laugh, I can stay up, positive and non-disturbed. And so that's why also 7s are very sensitive to hanging out with a complainer, a Debbie Downer, a whiner. It's like, ugh, like, if I can't get you happy, I got to get out of here. Because if I can regulate you, I can regulate me. And 7s do it by trying to create everything happy, making everybody happy, making the situation happy. And then I'm regulated. And I don't want to be around anyone who's dysregulated because it'll trap me right away and I can't stand that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Does it make sense? A lot of sense. A bit too much sense. So I remember this is like 2015 or 16. So I was really into magic, because it's magical and I want to be popular, you know what I mean? So I wanted to perform magic. The only problem is I was scared of it. I was really scared of just showing up to people random, hey, can you please pick a card? My hands like shake, That was the era. It was so much. I remember I went to America as a kid. Okay. And I went to this amusement park. And there were like people in like costumes, and they had like a board saying like high five me or hug me, right? And I was so scared to do it because it's like a random stranger had like show up and do a high five. I was like terrified. And my brother used to.
Were you terrified that was going to happen?
I don't remember. I was really young, but I was just terrified of like it's like a random stranger, that I'm like giving a high five to. It's like I don't know what might happen or something like that. I was just terrified at that moment. I didn't know why exactly. I was just terrified of just showing to people, like people judge me. I don't psychoanalyzed why. Back then, I was not I I didn't have the kind of wisdom I have now. Now, if that happened, I would like, understand why it's happening, stuff like that. Back then, I didn't even know what was happening, why it was happening. I just knew I was reacting to this particular way. So I'm in my soft skills class. And soft skills teacher comes into the class and he's like, you know what, guys, I don't feel like teaching today. Can someone entertain us? And my roommate is in the same class, and he knows I perform magic, because when there are people who I know, that I know even if I mess up, it's not going to be that bad, I feel somewhat comfortable, because the possibilities are not that crazy and the risk is not that high. There's not a random stranger or something like that. So he looks at, I remember he looks at me. I look at him because should I raise my hand and say, sir, this guy knows magic? But I looked at the professor, and this feeling of terror, and my eyes and my entire experience just goes like numb. And it was like my uh the way I describe it is, even in public speaking, is like when I'm on the stage, I literally cannot see the audience if I'm afraid. I just cannot see the people in front of me.
Mm.
Even if someone's like waving like this, I just cannot register. You know, that was the feeling, and it felt like my heart was beating outside my chest. And then there was there's another guy of my same class who also performed magic, then went and performed magic on the stage, and I was like, damn, that could be me, but it's not, you know. And
Uh-huh.
that was like one of the many reasons why, I have to figure this fear out. I have to figure why it's happening, what is happening, you know. This is
Yeah. So
why I'm here, ended up here.
there's
Yeah.
some anticipation. Fear has an anticipation talent mixed into it. And the fear in the mental faculties is when you're anticipating something goes wrong, something horrible is going to happen. I'm going to, you know, I'm going to faint. My heart's pounding so hard. My magic trick is going to fail. People are going to
Yeah.
think I'm filling this sentence. People are going to think I'm,
Uh,
what would be the most horrible thing people could think about you? People are
Stupid maybe,
stupid.
or
Yeah.
scared. I was scared. I don't know.
Yeah. And I'm going to tell you, the fives, the sixes, and sevens all have a sensitivity to being seen as stupid. Because where is that intelligence? The mental intelligence, wanting to be seen not as stupid, really creates a lot of fear for five, six, and sevens. I have found just in working with people. So, yeah,
Interesting.
people are going to think I'm stupid. People are going to think I'm flaky. People are going to think I'm not intelligent.
Invasive. Yeah, no social grace.
Yeah, no, yeah. So these mental constructs of how I might look can create just as much fear as a bear coming at me, actually,
Yeah,
because it's the fear of my self system, of my self image being destroyed, being found not what I'm supposed to be, and therefore I'm not lovable and I'm not worthy, and then the whole annihilation, survival annihilation begins again. So, but public speaking sets up the fear of something I need to be that I'm afraid I won't be in front of others. Creates a lot of
mm,
fear in 9 different ways. Who can I not be in front of others?
yeah,
It can't be stupid. My magic trick can't be stupid. It can't fail. What if
yeah,
I'm not entertaining? What if I'm not making people happy?
yeah. That's also crazy, right? It's because as you mentioned in the seven, the people's state around me also affects me, and I
They
have
do.
this thing where, oh, if they're all down, then even I'm down.
What if your audience is like this?
Then it's like, now I know when I perform a trick, I don't do it that seriously. But then it was like when I perform it, it's all leading up to this moment, and the entire frame of magic itself is like, can you catch me? You know, can you catch me, fool you? Or you know what I mean? So I don't like the entire premise to begin with. So I stopped doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Sevens, I don't know if you've ever seen this experiment. It's called the still face experiments. I mean, it's applicable to all 9 types, but for when a little 7 child is so happy, and it's because 7 wants to create happiness outside of itself, so it regulates happiness inside of itself. So sevens are quite often quite entertaining, to pick up everybody's moods, to be the life of the party, to make somebody happy, make someone smile. They tend to have this inclination. But when a 7 is ramping up to get other people happy, undefended, unstuck, and there's no response.
Mm-hmm.
Someone looks bored.
That's crazy, huh?
It's scary for a 7 because then the 7 starts to dysregulate inside. I either got to make you happy or I got to get out of here. It's
Yes.
because then 7s start to dysregulate into their own stuck, chaotic, oh, this doesn't feel good, which 7s do not like to go in here and feel that. We'd like to stay out here and make the joy happen. Does that resonate for you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I don't know why. I always knew what you're saying, but the way you're framing the sentences or the words, it's like it's making me think a bit more deeper about it. It feels like I'm discovering it again. The way when you put it, the way you put it,
Yeah.
uh, it's
And that's what
interesting.
I think the Enneagram, the gift of the Enneagram is such a tremendous gift because we do suffer these things inside of ourselves. And why the Enneagram is becoming so successful is that when we tune into these particular patterns of these structures, one of them of which is my own, and when I hear my own structure spoken about, I'm like, oh my God, I've been trying to say that. That's exactly what I experienced. And it put words around what I've been suffering, what I thought was suffering in silence about.
Yeah,
And then I realized, oh my gosh, this is the structure of the way I'm organized. And I feel like it gave me permission to own that insight that I've had about myself. Right?
yeah,
It's inside of you, it's inside of us as some kind of insight, it's some kind of knowing about ourselves. The Enneagram gives us
yeah,
permission to actually own it, see it, recognize it, lean into it, and start working with it, right? These patterns are beautiful. They're part of nature. It's like the way the ego system is organized is absolutely necessary to becoming an individuated human, living on this ball, spinning in dark space, right? Having a fulfilling enough life. We need the ecosystem to organize, and it's organizing around particular patterns to adapt, to survive, and to make sure we're loved. Nothing wrong with the patterns. However, not looking at the patterns, not having a relationship to the patterns, not knowing we even have patterns, that's actually where we get in trouble.
yeah,
That's where our life actually gets really limited. That's where our relationships continue to get stuck. That's how we end up in the same relationship with different people all the time, because we have no idea that we're running a particular pattern solution to life. And we might have more choice. We can develop more neural capacity that will allow us to have more choice in how we want to respond to the same situation next time. And that's what this work is so amazing. Otherwise, we really are just kind of these patterns. People say, the Enneagram is putting me in the box. No, actually, you're already in a box, and the Enneagram is going to help you get out of the box. It's going to help you expand and develop new neural pathways so that you have more choice, so that you have more response flexibility,
makes
so
sense.
you can resource the gifts of these other human patterns that are available to us through practice and allowing ourselves, accepting ourselves, and then allowing another uncomfortable option to be played out in our system where we build new neural capacities, this is really exciting, right?
So, so I'm gonna challenge you, okay? Uh, so you often call these patterns beautiful, right?
Yeah.
So what does beauty mean really to you?
I call them beautiful because each of the patterns started with an aptitude and a gift. So we come in with particular predilections, propensities, and proclivities to organize ourselves against threat and survival, threat to our survival and ensuring that we
Okay.
survive, and then threat to my sense of self. So, as the ego is organizing itself and fortifying itself to be in this world, back here, there's something about me that I already know about my inherent me, my essential self. And that is a very precious, kind of a coherent body of energy of a certain particular kind of light that has something really beautiful to offer the world. So as we've gone through the 9 types, all through this process, and you see that each one brings a gift that helps everybody else survive in the tribe, that has contributed to the evolution of the species. I call these beautiful. They're innate, they're qualities of being, they're qualities of essence. And the ego that organizes to defend us and to perpetuate what we think we're going to be lovable for, it is being informed by the essence that we started with. And that essence is, I think, cosmically very holy, cosmically a particular kind of light that has its own kind of radiance. And that's why I call it beautiful.
So you're saying almost like the intention of these patterns, when you understand it, it's actually coming from a very pure place, but it's actually very myopic in nature, because
Absolutely.
very limited in nature. The way its perspective is limited, so it twists pure intention. There's a quote which says the path to hell is paved with good intentions. You know.
I think the pattern. I love how you put that. That the essence within has been informed by a particularly preordained kind of light, a particular kind of spark. And that spark has a particular intention. And in order to carry out the intention, it gets imbued with particular gifts. Those gifts inform the temperamental, physical development of the little space creature that's about to be born. And then it wants to manifest, it wants to offer its particular intentional gift to the world. And it actually, we want to find it also. We want to be met with that same energy here on the planet. You know, as a type 1, I want, when I encounter someone whose writing is beautiful and perfectly punctuated and the syntax is stunning, it's like I salivate when I see that changes the world, when I see someone doing something good and sacred in this world. I just get this incredible calm abiding, because what I'm hoping to bring to the world, I'm also seeing in the world. And I'm like, wow, it just has this resonance for me. And it's like when type 8 encounters another person who is going to have its back, who's going to bring its full self, when it's going to stand for what's right, when it's going to fight for the underdog, when a type 8 finds that in the world and it meets that other energy in the world, it's like brings calm abiding. So all 9 types are trying to bring this beautiful intention, intentional purpose and gift to the world. And we're all looking to find it here too, to be met by it here too. This is my hypothesis. This is one of my ideas, but I have experienced that within myself and with the people that I work with.
Okay, cool. So I think we have like gone long enough for this episode. So we'll cut it here and we'll like take it in another episode in the future, and we'll see where that goes. But thank you for your time, Susan. I really love the conversation as always.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Prem, for having me. This has been awesome. Again, talking with you.
Thanks.